Afternoon. Welcome, people, at the Global Festival of Ideas for Sustainable Development. We're here on the live stage with the wonderful, exceptional Dr. Alaa Murabit. You all heard her earlier this morning give the keynote opening speech, and I saw a lot of people taking notes. So we're going to dive a bit more into those notes. But first, I'm going to introduce Alaa. If you don't know Dr. Alaa Murabit, you need to know her. She is a medical doctor. She is the founder of the Voice of Libyan Women. She is the speaker of a viral TED Talk, and she is an SDG advocate. And I think we want to start off today asking about what it means to be an SDG advocate. What does that mean? Apart from coming here and doing amazing speeches and firing us all up, what else does that entail?
Well, I think, so first and foremost, Frances, this incredible, incredible woman, forgot to mention in her introduction that I was the love of her life.
Also the love of my life.
I think that's an important...
confirmed by Adele.
Exactly.
Yes.
I think that's an important detail. But no, so we've gotten to work together in the past on advocacy and awareness of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And being an advocate, there's 16 more of us. And being an advocate really means taking that agenda and making it translatable and applicable to different audiences. So we know that, oftentimes CEOs and heads of state and civil society and local community members don't necessarily look at things the exact same, and they don't have the same aims and goals and preferences and priorities. And being an advocate is really about bringing those different audiences to the table and saying, listen, this is the agenda, this is what we need, this is how we can resource it, this is what you can do to both hit your priority point and also further this agenda. So it's really about ensuring that there's active cooperation on what is already a very inclusive and universal agenda, but sometimes needs a bit of a push.
And you spoke about that push this morning in your talk. You said several tweetable things. They was all out there on the Twitter sphere, including that investing in women and girls is not just the right thing to do, but the smartest and actually the only way that we achieve the goals. With that step, we don't get there. But I want to focus on something else you said, which was you gave us some action points from your talk, and you spoke about the times we find ourselves in the last year, 2 years. Two things. There's an increasing questioning of global cooperation, the benefits of it, the benefits of whether it's multinationalism, organizations like the United Nations, the European Union. And you talked about engaging with people that don't necessarily see the world as one might see them. What does that look like in your work, pragmatically?
Well, I think the important thing of recognizing kind of our new political trajectory is that it's not necessarily that new. This has happened before. It will happen again, right? This is a 15-year agenda. Now we have about 13 and a half years left, but it's a long time agenda. Policies will change, presidents will change, prime ministers will change, parliaments will change, and political platforms will, and that's a reality. Technology is going to introduce new things to our space. We're going to have to struggle a lot with issues of employment and economic growth. Those are the realities of our time, and I think when we continue to talk in almost these yes chambers where everybody in the room agrees. So I say, women's rights is important for the goals, and everybody in the room already agrees. We're not actually getting anything done, because in order for these goals to actually happen, we do need, if not popular support, at least enough support to push it into spaces it's not already in, right? Enough support to get it active, not only on university campuses, but also in religious spaces where you don't often hear that perspective. So it's in my view, on a daily basis, we have to sit down with people who say, listen, I think the goals are completely unrealistic. I hear that on average 5 times a day. And it usually comes down to resourcing of the goals. And my response to that often is it's not necessarily anything, if you do not prioritize it, is unrealistic. Anything. You can create a New Year's resolution to lose weight, but if you don't actually wake up or cut your calories, you're never actually going to do it, right? So we can all say we've signed on to these goals and these goals are important, but if we're giving $7 to $9 trillion into the global military space and we're only putting less than 0.1% of our budget into sustainable development and peace building, then we can't realistically expect any different. So I think we need to start not necessarily challenging the goals, but definitely challenging our governing spaces and saying, listen, it's a governing priority. And what we define as security, what I define as security, is education, it's healthcare, it's equal opportunity, because we know in the long term, that's what actually leads to peace. It's not militaries, it's not what we see today in the world. And the reality is that we all have to actually start saying that to our governments.
So I think something that really struck true with me was when the CEO of Plan International spoke after you. She said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting different results. And she challenged us to all think, what are we going to do differently over the next year to challenge that approach that's been taken. So my question to you is, what are you going to do differently in the next 12 months to avoid that?
I mean, thanks for keeping the really easy question last. So obviously as an advocate and as a high-level commissioner, there are certain priority points that I hit. And my greatest priority is to be able to introduce the goals to audiences that we don't normally get to have in the room. Not everybody can come down to New York or Bonn or be part of this conversation, but it needs to be a much larger conversation, or it's unrealistic. So that's been a huge professional priority. And on a personal level, I do something I like to call my mentorship program. So when I first started, a very well-meaning and wonderful mentor of mine said, you're going to have 4 key challenges in your life, in your professional life. And that's that you're a woman, that you're young, it's your ethnicity, I'm Arab, and it's your religion. That's what people see when I walk into a room. And those are unconscious biases that I have to work against every time I open my mouth. And I think one of the things that really struck me about that was he saw those as challenges and I saw those as huge opportunities, because it meant that I could go into places and speak with people and have credibility in those spaces that he did not innately have. So it provided me a different platform. And with this mentorship program, the hope is, I always complain about a lack of young people in governing spaces. I think it's wonderful to be advocates and to be civil society activists, but I want to see them in policy. I want to see them be in the room and be architects of projects, because then it's realistically implementable, right? If you don't have an inclusive approach to the creation of policy, it can't be implementable. It doesn't speak to everybody in that space, or at least it doesn't speak to the majority. So with this internship program, the idea is to take people who are already excelling in different spaces and to provide them the network and the opportunity and the know-how and the outreach and even just the mental challenge of understanding different situations and the politics of different realities, and hopefully propel them into a place where they are working in a more public sphere, they are working in policy, they are working in governance, and they have the leverage and the credibility to be able to do that. So that's my coming year. I really want to be able to formalize that more and bring more individuals, particularly people who have those unconscious biases when they walk into the room, that they have to overcome, and be able to provide a network and a support system for them.
Okay, well, you've teed us up beautifully, because we're going to welcome to the stage now the young people that are working with you, and through a competitive call for intern applications. Tell us a little bit, and we'll welcome you guys up on stage.
Awesome. Okay, so we are welcoming...
Come on up.
Come on up. So Elijah Walters-Othman, who is a 16-year-old activist from Manchester. You guys can take a seat. Maisha, Reza, who is a PhD. She got her PhD at 26, so everybody can feel just really unaccomplished right now. In the sciences, Michael Smith, who is a Master's of Public Health student. Aaron Rodriguez, a law student from Canada and El Salvador. And Salwa Shamim, who specializes and is an expert in refugee programs, projects, and displacement. So these are my incredible interns. There is one more who unfortunately couldn't be here today. Thank you.
Well done, guys. Let's give them a round of applause, because that's an amazing lineup.
And so these incredible individuals were part of we did a very wide-reaching, so as I said, it's been a personal project. I decided I wanted to have particularly more young women is my personal aim, but I do think there's a necessity to also talk with young male leaders and really help them understand and redefine that space as well. And so we did an open application. Thank you for sharing it and distributing it. And we ended up getting over 170 applicants. And these were the ones who just did incredibly, incredibly well and have been phenomenal. I send them ridiculous things to research. I ask them to write op-eds on a bunch of things they've never looked at before, and they all come back and say, thanks, you know, we've learned so much. So it's been incredible. Now, the hard stuff. I've set the bar this high, and you have to impress everybody in the room. You realize that, right? Like, and guys, if you're not impressed, let them know, right? Let them know. Let them know. So, Elijah, I'm going to start with you. You are 16. We've had an adventure getting him to Bonn. It was the first time he traveled, and I genuinely, for the first time, realized what it feels like to be a mother. Because I was like, where is he? Where is he? Did he make it to the hotel? But you're 16. You've been working on youth issues in Manchester and racial inequality and socioeconomic inequality for a long time. Yeah. What drives you, and what really has propelled your passion for the Sustainable Development Goals?
Okay, I guess my initial drive is because I'm from a city called Manchester, as Alaa said, but I'm from a working class community as well. So growing up in society, I often felt as if I didn't have a voice, and I remember being young with the aspiration to want to change the world, but for some reason, the people around me could never visualize me in that position, and so I decided to question why. Why was it that for so many young people from my background that our identity was already determined at birth, and then I realized the inequalities that many young people are facing right now within society, especially working class young people. So this is where my dream developed, to want to change the world and represent those voices. Most recently, I work with an organization called Reclaim in Manchester. What they focus on is young working class people being heard, being seen, and leading change. And since then, they've given me the opportunity to make changes in my communities that I never thought were possible. And most recently is the latest campaign, and to many of us here in Europe, I'm sure we can all understand the situation of Brexit. Now, the thing about that is that regardless from a political perspective of leaving or remaining, if young people were able to vote during that referendum, we could have essentially made the difference. And it was at that point I realized the significance of young working class people and just young people in general, because the way that things are in society is that politics, everyone deserves a voice, including young people. So this is where I get my backing from and wanting to represent. So thank you very much. Thanks.
Before you hand over the mic, why don't you tell them what you're running for right now?
I also represent the Youth Council in Manchester as a regional representative. I'm now going for the elections for a national representative of Manchester, and yeah.
Amazing. Anyone lives in Manchester, you need to vote for this young man. That's your stump speech. Congratulations. I actually had a quick follow-up question for you, though. Can I? Sorry. Sure. So I work for the UN Youth Envoy, and that's the youngest senior diplomat at the UN, who last year launched a campaign called Not Too Young to Run, to get young people to run for office and to change the law in countries where there's arbitrary age barriers to running for office. Yeah. So I just thought I'd publicly ask you to join the campaign and the meeting we're going to have in 2 weeks with young members of Parliament in London. Can you be there?
Definitely.
Okay, great.
That's funny. Thank you so
much. Maisha, I know you are also very passionate about leadership and inclusivity, but rather than youth, your focus is specifically on women. What drove you to that, particularly coming from a sciences background, and what are you doing about it on a daily basis?
Hi everyone, I'm Maisha and I'm a skeletal muscle biologist from Singapore. So I will be defending my PhD dissertation next month. I am very strongly passionate about women's equality and women's leadership. So what sparked this interest in me was during my undergraduate and graduate programs, where in Singapore at least, women and men were about 50-50 in our colleges, which is probably a dream for, in Europe or even in the United States. But we had that privilege. But that did not translate into leadership of women in academia. And that bothered me because as women, we were doing very well in our fields in graduate programs and undergraduate programs. But I was worried as to what is going to happen to my career because I couldn't see female professors over there. So I found that surprising. And I also realized that this is not restricted to just science and academia. Women are highly underrepresented in all sectors of leadership. So what I am doing right now is that I'm reaching out to different women all over the world, young women who have strong influence in their fields, to talk about women's inclusion and what are the challenges a modern woman faces before they can access leadership positions. And right now, I'm also writing a book to share their experiences on what on their suggestions. And I'm also personally suggesting policies and solutions that could help women overcome the barriers that will provide them the platform to access leadership positions. And I also would like to highlight the significance of intervention from policymakers and governments, because I think that it is really difficult to expect that this change will come organically or naturally. We need to do something about it, and people who have the power to change, the governments and the policymakers, should catalyze the change.
Amazing. Round of applause. So that's stunning. You spoke about what governments need to do, what policymakers need to do. What's your advice for young women that are out there, maybe they're studying, maybe they're thinking about it, and feeling a little bit intimidated by the barriers, the so-called glass ceiling? You've clearly been powering right through at a very young age. What do you say to young women that you meet?
One of the things that I would say is, it sounds cliche, but never give up. And when I say never give up, I mean that there will be barriers, and there will be people telling us that we might not be able to do it. But it is important to stand your ground and show them that we can do it. And I think women, whichever women have privileges, I've grown up in a very privileged environment, which is why I'm trying to use this platform to advocate for women's empowerment. And I think I'd like to highlight that intervention from government is important. So I think every woman who has a privilege and a platform should fight for women's rights and help other women propel to success as well.
Incredible. Do you guys feel inadequate yet? I feel wholly inadequate. I have for the past 6 months. It's okay. I've internalized it already. So Michael, you have done a phenomenal amount of work in health, in the health space, and you also feel very passionate about access and about inclusive approaches. So can you tell us a little bit about your work?
Sure. So I work full-time as a developmental and cell biologist. And in the laboratory, specifically a research setting, things can move pretty slowly and they can get a bit dull, and quite frankly, they're boring. And I realized quickly that that's not what I wanted to do with my career. I sort of wanted to look beyond the microscope and start considering the global community in a much wider lens. And so that's why I started to transition into public health. And in my studies and in my research, I very quickly realized, and I was quite frankly shocked and incensed, to find that a lot of well-established scientific and medical practices that are very commonly used don't reach the populations that need them most. There was a huge disconnect between access and need. And so that's when I got a little more interested in the Sustainable Development Goals and understanding that pretty basic preventative measures like vaccinations for children or having clean delivery kits and clean spaces for pregnant women don't reach the communities and the situations where they need them most. And so now I'm looking into things like e-health and telemedicine, like video conferences via phone, receiving medical advice through text to increase access. And hopefully with changing technology and the advances in technology, those platforms can be used to provide more health access to the more people that need them most.
Amazing, really. Round of applause. So in the Sustainable Development Goals, or in the 2030 Agenda, which encompasses the Sustainable Development Goals, there's a lot of talk about science, technology, and innovation, really unhelpfully referred to as the STI Forum, which for a lot of us young people means something really different, still health-related, but still. So there's a branding issue there. Nonetheless, I'm interested, you gave us a couple of examples there, maternal health, vaccination. We talk about being in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution right now. If you were going to bet on a single piece of technology or idea, a technological advancement, if you were in a Bill Gates situation to achieve these goals, what would you bet on?
That's a good question. I would probably bet on technology that is able to reach the most people very quickly and effectively, things, programs, apps that are able to sidestep linguistic issues, issues of language, issues of origin, and really simplify and distill the most essential sort of the transmission of health information as widely and as quickly as possible.
Awesome. So when they're finished speaking, we are going to open the floor to a couple of questions. So if you got them, keep them written down. We promise we'll invite you guys in as well. So Aaron, you also deal with issues of access, although it's not in health, it's in law. And I would love to hear not only what made you so passionate about law and what made you passionate about this space, but what you think the solution is in the years to come, and what you think the importance of legal access is.
Well, I think it's really important, legal access, because, well, I feel it's the inequality. Law should be equal for all of us. When I started studying, to me, law was for everyone, right? It's in our constitutions, it's in our codes, and everywhere. But unfortunately, it's not what's happening in the reality. And reality of things, people that don't have the means to pay for lawyers don't get the same justice that people that actually do have the money to pay for them. So, yeah, to me, the most important thing would be to open those barriers and just let everyone have the same justice. And what I would like to do with law, with what I like to do with my studies, would be to work for those communities, for those people that don't really have the ability to pay for good lawyers and have the good justice that they deserve, because the law should be equal for all of us. So yeah.
Brilliant. So there's an old saying that says, without justice, there's no peace, and without peace, there can be no justice. And you've spoken a bit about how integrated justice and access to legal resources is to the SDGs as well. How do you start to pick apart a problem like access to legal services? Where does your work begin? What does the front line look like?
Communities. Go to these communities and actually work with them. Right now, next session, I'm going to be able to work with them. It's a program in my faculty of law, in my program, where I can actually work with them and yeah, find solutions with them. So that would be locals first.
See, isn't this incredible? This generation knows you actually have to go to communities and speak with them rather than actually try to implement solutions and force them on. So our last but not least is Salwa Shamim, who is an incredible young woman who has done phenomenal work in women's rights and research on unemployment and constitutions, but also her core expertise is in refugee programs and policies. And I believe her and I had a conversation last night, and she actually spoke about how interconnected it all is, and how she thinks there's one underlying issue we have to challenge. And I would love for you to relay that here to this audience.
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Salwa, and just a bit about me. I am many things, I suppose. I am a producer on a documentary series. I'm a consultant and a policy analyst, which makes my job tough because there's so many disparate ideas. And I guess back to Alaa's question, which is, with all these disparate ideas, what I find to be the most concerning thing, whether that's in policy or law or health or education or women's rights, is that we're not often willing to challenge the assumptions that some of these policies are created on. One of my main interests is peace and security, and looking at, again, what does it mean to be secure? And as Alaa mentioned before, there's so many varying definitions of security. Having worked with refugees, last 2 Decembers ago, I was in the Zaatari refugee camp in Jordan. And, I thought when I was there, I'd be overwhelmed and very much emotional about what I was seeing. But really what I took away was, we have a very narrow understanding of what it means to be secure, and we don't necessarily challenge what the current security apparatus is based upon. And that is that there is this global war complex, or this very militarized way of approaching security, which is really troubling because any policies you craft are therefore predicated on an assumption that may or may not be true. And so I think what we can all do in all of our fields is, look at what the assumptions are, who are the system builders, and challenge that power, and consider yourself an architect, an equal architect in building that system, and be unafraid in challenging, I'm an American, so I understand the role that American foreign policy plays and the role that American military plays across the world. But unfortunately, you don't hear this sort of discourse at a local level, at a national level, and also not at an international level. And so I think it's really important that wherever our experiences are, that we try our best to
to be brave when looking at these assumptions and doing kind of the unpopular thing and just challenging it a bit more. And then as a precursor to you know, some of my own work right now is looking at the ways in which we can bridge this gap through media. Again, I'm biased because as an American, I look at my media system and I'm just like, this is kind of a mess. But I think there is an opportunity to take all of these different goals and to challenge them in a very positive way, and media is a very great vehicle to do that.
So you've mentioned that you're an American. Obviously, the news yesterday was the dramatic increase in American military spending, or the plan by the current president. What's your advice? A lot of young Americans, a lot of young people have been activated by recent events, from Brexit to situation in the Philippines. It's not just American youth or British youth. There are many young people that are realizing the agency they have beyond Twitter. Someone said today, your tweet won't change the world. What's your advice to young people on what they can, as individuals, as students, as people that don't have outsized power when it comes to influencing foreign policy or military spend? What can they do right now as an individual?
Yeah, I think the number one thing you can do is to be informed. I know that because of the rise of a lot of a certain political trajectory, seems like it's new, but it's really not. And I know that, like, you look at with the statistic you just pointed out, military spending is increasing, but it has been increasing for the past however many years. It was increasing during the Obama administration. It was increasing during the Bush administration. So I think one thing is learning that these things aren't new. It's just that we might not have been awake during them. And I think is understanding, okay, we have this issue, but it's been happening. Maybe we were oblivious to it before. Maybe we willfully ignored it. But I think being aware and being informed, that gives you the capacity to inform your local communities at local level to make policy change, and that will eventually reverberate up to the top.
Incredible. Okay, so I'm going to open it to the floor for some questions. I know many people have questions. If they don't, I may just have to, like, walk into the audience and ask. All right, awesome. Say your name and your question and who it's directed to.
Yeah, well, I'm Dan Thomas. I work at the UN General Assembly for the President of the General Assembly. One of the challenges he's set all of us working at the UN is the challenge of communicating the goals to the world, making sure that every person has some knowledge of this plan, this master plan for humanity. What's your advice about how can we do that?
What's your advice? Tell the multilateral system and every government in the world how to do better.
I think one of the things that needs to be done is to get women involved, especially in terms of local communities. There's always a big implementation gap. Okay, he's writing that down. There's always a big implementation gap. Governments or international organizations, they come up with policies, but somehow it cannot be implemented on a local level, and there's a big gap in that. So how can we address that? I think it's important to not just maintain policies at the government level. We need to involve local community leaders because they are trusted in the community. I would definitely listen to my community leader before I would, listen to some government or a body that is so far away from me, because that connection is only developed when you trust someone. So, and women are very important characters in this policy, I feel, because you can see in many villages, in many small communities, women are really good in gathering people and organizing people and delivering messages. Very simple things like we need to recycle or we need to reduce waste, something that women control at home as well. Women control their waste, for example, waste management. So they can be leaders in waste management, but we always overlook that. If we can get these women involved, they can organize many of the communities and actually implement the policies that the governments want to. That's just.
Okay, well, we have 2 minutes left. Oh.
Okay.
Okay, so what we're gonna take one more question and then we're gonna let the panel wrap up. So who has the key question? Is it Etta? A burning question. I think Etta does.
Hello, I'm Etta. I'm a UN young leader for the SDGs. I think you guys represent such a diverse you're a diverse representation of different industries and different parts of the world. And I really like the last point about staying informed. Can each of you go and name your go-to place to get information, to get latest information, whether it's a website, a blog, a book? What would you recommend as a young person? Where can we start?
Okay, I'm going to give the mic to everyone because you all have to answer that. Such a brilliant question.
You're allowed to say me. I mean, we know.
Okay. I mean, besides Allah, I would have to say it's the people within my communities, you know. I mean, of course, as well as educational resources are there and are provided, but at the same time, for me growing up, it's the inspirational heroes that I've grown up around, the local leaders. Just knowing them alone have taught me so much about the world and the diversity amongst them as well. So I guess for me, it's the experience times on it. So.
Very quickly, I get my information along with, of course, the regular media outlets, but I don't necessarily rely completely on them. I will try my best to look into several different sources, because in science they always teach us one source is not enough. If you have many different sources, then maybe there's some credibility. So I think people should not just look at one outlet. They should compare multiple outlets so that they can enhance their critical thinking as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to echo that. I mean, the importance of peer review and running facts and research by your fellow professionals is essential in trying to avoid sort of the dreaded alternative or pseudo facts. So it's probably not just one source, but multiple sources.
I have to re-echo that.
Name your source. Name your sources.
Basic news, Twitter, really quickly like this, and if not, it would be my teachers. Whenever there's something happening in the world.
Okay, I'll name a specific one. One that inspired me as someone in the media is The Intercept. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but The Intercept was founded by Glenn Greenwald, Laura Poitras, and Jeremy Scahill, who did a lot of work on covert warfare that the U.S. was conducting abroad militarily. And the reason that outlet is fantastic is because they very much focus on what I was mentioning earlier, which is systematic policy change, the way systems work. And I think generally we need to know how to understand where pieces fit into the puzzle, and they do a fantastic job of that. They do it in a very smart, intelligent way. And I mean, personally, I admire them as journalists, but I think if you were to read anything by The Intercept, you would walk out a much more intelligent human being.
Amazing. Listen, I'm going to take moderator's privilege and ask the question to Alaa, because I want to know what your sources are when you can't go to yourself.
I do use The Intercept on occasion, but so I'm awful. I genuinely am. I'm one of those people who clicks on clickbait. Like, I don't know if you guys do the same thing. I do. I see a headline and I'm like, this is tragic, and I click on it, and then I send it to my whole family, and then they actually tell me I'm wrong. And my family is quite large, so I have 5 brothers, 5 sisters, brothers-in-law, etc., who send me back links, and they're like, no, this is wrong for the multiple reasons. So I think I'm actually probably the instigator of fake news in my family, and they all keep me in check. And we have this nice WhatsApp group, which is we should rename it from like updates to like ensuring Alaa does not cause world problems based on the fake news that I click on.
Amazing. Keep it in the family. Okay, we have a lightning round last question for each of you before they kick us off and turn off the lights. You've been here for about 4 hours, and we've got 2 more days to go. But if you could summarize the Global Festival of Ideas for Sustainable Development in one word, maybe a compound noun at most, what would it be?
Partnerships.
Pressure.
Women's leadership.
Great.
As we can see based on this panel.
Amazing. Yeah.
Hope.
Hope.
Continuum.
Continuum.
Cooperation.
Nice. I'm going to say exciting, which is really deep.
I'm going to say fantastic, motivating. I know, but I'm taking co-moderator's privilege because I didn't like my first one.
No, they were both fantastic. Listen, it's my privilege to thank this amazing panel, Alaa Murabit, her amazing interns. Thank you all so much.